over her desk in the corner. Naomi Washington looked up from her computer screen, her thick-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her oversized blazer hung loose on her small frame. She had been Harrison's secretary for 2 years, handling his schedule with quiet efficiency while he barely acknowledged her existence. "Miss Washington," Harrison called out, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "My office. Now." Naomi's heart sank. Something in his tone suggested this wasn't about scheduling his next board meeting. She grabbed her notepad and hurried after him, her sensible flats making soft padding sounds on the floor. Harrison's corner office was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, awards lined the walls, and a massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room. He settled into his leather chair and gestured for Naomi to sit across from him. "There's a charity gala this Saturday night," Harrison began, his fingers steepled as he watched her reaction. "The Children's Hospital Foundation. Very exclusive. Very expensive tickets." Naomi nodded, already reaching for her phone to check his calendar. "Would you like me to confirm your attendance, Mr. Blake?" A slow smile spread across Harrison's face, and Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen that smile before, usually right before he delivered bad news to a competitor. "Actually, I have a different proposal." Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "I need a date for the evening. Someone to accompany me to this very important social event." Naomi blinked behind her glasses, confused. "Should I call the agency you usually use for events like this?" "No need." Harrison's smile widened. "I'm asking you." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Naomi felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She knew exactly what kind of women Harrison typically brought to these events. Tall, model beautiful socialites who looked perfect in designer gowns and knew how to make conversation with millionaires. "Mr. Blake, I don't think I'm the right person for this kind of event," Naomi said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nonsense," Harrison replied, his tone dripping with false enthusiasm. "You know my schedule better than anyone. You understand my business. You're the perfect choice." But Naomi could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't kindness or recognition of her value. This was something else entirely. Something that made her stomach twist with dread. "Wait, are you wondering why Harrison would choose his plain secretary for such an important event? What could he possibly gain from this unusual invitation?" Don't forget to subscribe and comment below with your thoughts on Harrison's real motives. Harrison stood up and walked around his desk, coming to lean against it directly in front of Naomi. "The gala starts at 7. Cocktails are at 6:30. It's black tie, so you'll want to dress appropriately." His eyes swept over her current outfit with obvious distaste. "I'm sure you can find something suitable." Naomi's hands trembled as she clutched her notepad. She wanted to refuse, to make some excuse about being busy or not having the right clothes. But Harrison Blake wasn't the kind of man who accepted refusal. He was her boss and she needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were mounting, and her younger brother Jerome was finally getting the chance to attend college on a partial scholarship. The rest of his tuition came from Naomi's salary, and she couldn't afford to lose this position, no matter how uncomfortable Harrison's request made her feel. "I'll pick you up at 6, Harrison continued, already turning his attention back to his computer screen. "Text me your address. And Miss Washington." He looked up at her one final time. "Don't disappoint me." Naomi left his office on shaking legs, her mind racing. She had attended exactly 0 charity galas in her 26 years of life. She owned exactly one dress that could remotely be considered formal, a black number she had bought for her college graduation 4 years ago. It was simple, conservative, and definitely not designed for the kind of high society event Harrison was describing. Back at her desk, Naomi stared at her computer screen without seeing the emails that needed her attention. She thought about Harrison's smile, the way he had looked at her like she was some kind of joke he was planning to tell later. Her stomach churned with the growing realization that this invitation wasn't an honor or an opportunity. It was a setup. Harrison Blake was planning to humiliate her. The thought hit her like a physical blow, but even as tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, Naomi knew she couldn't refuse. She needed this job too much, and Harrison knew it. He was counting on her desperation, her inability to say no. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Kendra, a fashion designer who had recently started her own small boutique in Brooklyn. "How's work going, sis? You sound stressed lately." Naomi stared at the message, then slowly began typing back. If Harrison Blake wanted to humiliate her at this gala, If he thought she would show up looking ridiculous and out of place, maybe it was time to surprise him. Maybe it was time to show Harrison Blake exactly what he had been overlooking for the past 2 years. Her fingers moved across the phone screen. Kendra, I need your help. Big time. Can you meet me after work? I have a charity gala this Saturday, and I need to look absolutely perfect. Of course. What's the occasion? Finally got asked out by that billionaire boss of yours? Came the quick reply. Naomi almost laughed at the irony. Something like that. I'll explain everything when I see you. As she sent the message, Naomi felt something shift inside her chest. Fear was still there, along with hurt and anger at Harrison's obvious intentions. But underneath it all was something else, determination. Harrison Blake thought he could use her as entertainment for his wealthy friends. He thought she would show up looking awkward and uncomfortable, proving to everyone in attendance that she didn't belong in his world. He was counting on her to fulfill his expectations of her as the plain, unremarkable secretary who knew her place. But Naomi Washington had spent 2 years watching Harrison operate, learning his strategies, understanding how his brilliant mind worked. She had seen him turn the tables on competitors who underestimated him. She had watched him win battles that everyone expected him to lose. Now it was her turn to surprise someone. The rest of the workday passed in a blur of emails and phone calls, but Naomi's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about silk and diamonds, about the kind of transformation that would leave Harrison Blake speechless. She was thinking about showing up to his cruel game and winning it. At 5:30, she packed up her belongings and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught sight of her reflection in the polished metal. Plain brown eyes behind thick glasses, hair that never seemed to cooperate, clothes that hid rather than enhanced her figure. But reflections could change. And sometimes the biggest transformations came from the most unexpected places. Harrison Blake had no idea what he had just set in motion. Kendra Washington's boutique, stunning threads, occupied a corner space in a trendy Brooklyn neighborhood, its large windows displaying bold, colorful designs that caught the eye of passing pedestrians. When Naomi arrived at 7 that evening, her sister was already waiting with measuring tape draped around her neck and a concerned expression on her face. Okay, spill, Kendra said, pulling Naomi through the front door and locking it behind them. What's really going on? You sounded panicked on the phone. Naomi sank into one of the plush chairs Kendra kept for clients and told her sister everything. About Harrison's cruel invitation, about the obvious setup, about how desperate she was to keep her job despite the humiliation he was planning to put her through. Kendra listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing angrier with each detail. When Naomi finished, her sister was practically vibrating with fury. That arrogant piece of trash, Kendra muttered, pacing back and forth across the boutique's hardwood floor. He thinks he can embarrass my baby sister? He has no idea who he's messing with. Kendra, I can't quit, Naomi said desperately. Mama's treatments are expensive, and Jerome needs that tuition money. I have to go to this thing and survive it somehow. Oh, honey, Kendra stopped pacing and knelt in front of Naomi's chair. You're not just going to survive it. You're going to walk into that gala looking so incredible that every man in the room forgets his own name, including your horrible boss. For the next hour, Kendra pulled dress after dress from her inventory, holding them up against Naomi's frame and shaking her head. No, definitely not. Too sweet, not dramatic enough. Finally, she disappeared into the back room and emerged with a garment bag. I was saving this for New York Fashion Week, Kendra said, unzipping the bag with ceremony. But I think it found its true purpose. The dress that emerged took Naomi's breath away. It was a deep emerald green, cut from silk so fine it seemed to flow like water. The design was elegant and sophisticated. A fitted bodice that would hug curves Naomi didn't even know she had, flowing into a skirt that would sweep dramatically with every movement. The neckline was modest but alluring, and subtle beadwork caught the light in all the right places. Kendra, I can't wear this, Naomi whispered. It's too beautiful. Too expensive. You're wearing it, Kendra said firmly. Now strip. We need to see how much tailoring we'll need to do. The next morning, Naomi called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She spent the day at Kendra's boutique, standing on a small platform while her sister worked magic with pins and scissors. The dress was transformed to fit Naomi's petite frame perfectly, and with each adjustment, Naomi began to see a different person in the mirror. Now for the real transformation, Kendra announced, leading Naomi to a chair she had set up like a salon station. Trust me completely. Don't look until I'm finished. For the next 3 hours, Kendra worked with the focus of an artist creating a masterpiece. She washed and conditioned Naomi's hair with expensive products, then set it in rollers. While it dried, she applied a face mask that made Naomi's skin glow. Then came makeup, applied with the skill of someone who had trained at the finest cosmetic schools. "Your hair is naturally gorgeous," Kendra murmured as she worked. "You just never learned how to style it. And your skin is perfect. You've been hiding behind those glasses and baggy clothes for so long that you forgot how beautiful you are." When Kendra finally stepped back and turned Naomi toward the mirror, the woman looking back was a stranger. Her hair fell in soft, glossy waves around her shoulders, framing a face that seemed to glow with inner light. Her eyes, freed from their thick glasses and enhanced with subtle makeup, were large and striking. Her lips, touched with a perfect shade of rose, looked full and inviting. "I don't understand," Naomi whispered, touching her face as if to make sure it was real. "How did you do this?" "I didn't do anything except show what was already there," Kendra replied, tears in her eyes. "You've always been beautiful, Naomi. You just needed someone to help you see it." Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth. Naomi stood in front of her full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The emerald dress fit like it had been designed specifically for her body. Her hair fell in perfect waves and her makeup was flawless. Instead of her thick glasses, she wore contact lenses that made her dark eyes seem enormous and luminous. But the most dramatic change wasn't physical. For the first time in years, Naomi stood straight, her shoulders back and her head held high. She looked like a woman who belonged at charity galas, who could hold her own in conversations with millionaires, who deserved to be seen and respected. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison, waiting downstairs. Naomi took one last look in the mirror, grabbed the small beaded clutch Kendra had insisted she carry, and headed for the door. Her heart was pounding, but it wasn't entirely from nerves. She was also excited to see the look on Harrison Blake's face when he realized his plan to humiliate her was about to backfire spectacularly. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like the longest of her life. When the doors opened, Naomi stepped out and immediately spotted Harrison near the entrance, checking his expensive watch with obvious impatience. He looked devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair styled to perfection. Naomi took a deep breath and walked toward him, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. She was halfway across the lobby before Harrison looked up, and when he did, his expression froze. His mouth actually fell open. His eyes widened as they traveled from her face down to her toes and back up again, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. For a long moment, Harrison Blake, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, seemed completely speechless. "Good evening, Mr. Blake," Naomi said smoothly, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting." Harrison opened and closed his mouth several times before managing to find his voice. "Miss Washington?" He sounded genuinely confused. "Is that really you? Were you expecting someone else?" Naomi asked, allowing the tiniest smile to play at the corners of her lips. Harrison continued to stare at her as if she had performed some kind of magic trick. "You look different." "Thank you," Naomi replied graciously, though inside she was savoring every second of his obvious shock. "Shall we go? I believe you mentioned the cocktail hour begins at 6:30. As they walked toward his waiting car, a sleek black Mercedes, Naomi could feel Harrison's eyes on her constantly. The driver held the door open, and as Naomi slid into the leather interior, she caught Harrison's expression in the window's reflection. He looked like a man who had just realized he had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. The drive to the hotel where the gala was being held passed mostly in silence. Harrison seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at Naomi as if he still couldn't quite believe the transformation. For her part, Naomi enjoyed watching the city lights blur past the window, feeling more confident with each passing block. "Miss Washington," Harrison finally said as they pulled up to the hotel's circular drive. "I have to ask, where did you find that dress?" "My sister designed it," Naomi replied simply. "She's very talented." "Your sister is a designer?" "Among other things. She owns her own boutique in Brooklyn." Harrison's eyebrows rose. It was clear that in 2 years of working together, he had never bothered to learn anything about Naomi's family or her life outside the office. The realization seemed to disturb him. The Mercedes pulled to a stop in front of the Plaza Hotel, where valets in crisp uniforms waited to assist arriving guests. Through the windows, Naomi could see elegantly dressed couples making their way up the red-carpeted entrance. "Are you ready for this?" Harrison asked, and for the first time since she had known him, he sounded uncertain. Naomi turned to look at him directly. Mr. Blake, I've been handling your schedule and managing your meetings for 2 years. I think I can manage one dinner party. As the valet opened her door and offered his hand, Naomi stepped out onto the red carpet with the grace of someone who had been attending such events her entire life. Behind her, she heard Harrison getting out of the car, but she didn't wait for him. Instead, she walked confidently toward the hotel's entrance, knowing without looking back that he was following her. The real test was about to begin. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom was a vision of elegant luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white roses and gold accents, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. New York's elite mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their designer gowns and custom tuxedos creating a sea of sophisticated glamour. As Naomi entered the ballroom beside Harrison, conversation seemed to pause. Heads turned, eyes followed her movement, and she could hear whispers rippling through the crowd like water. Who is that stunning woman with Harrison Blake? I've never seen her before. She's absolutely gorgeous. Is that his new girlfriend? She's breathtaking. Harrison noticed the attention too. His hand found the small of Naomi's back, a gesture that would have seemed possessive if she didn't know better. She could feel the tension radiating from him as he guided her through the crowd, nodding at acquaintances while trying to process the dramatic shift in dynamics. Harrison Blake, a warm voice called out, and they turned to see Charles Whitman, CEO of a major investment firm, approaching with his wife. Good to see you, old friend. Charles, Margaret, Harrison replied, his business smile sliding easily into place. I'd like you to meet my date for the evening, Naomi Washington. Charles extended his hand to Naomi with obvious appreciation. Miss Washington, it's a pleasure. You look absolutely radiant this evening. Thank you so much, Naomi replied gracefully, accepting his handshake with confidence. It's lovely to meet you both. Are you in fashion, dear? Margaret asked, clearly impressed by Naomi's elegant appearance. That dress is exquisite. Actually, my sister designed it, Naomi said proudly. She's building quite a reputation in Brooklyn. As they chatted, Naomi found herself falling naturally into the rhythm of high society conversation. She asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively, and shared just enough about herself to seem interesting without being overwhelming. When Charles mentioned a recent merger his firm had handled, Naomi surprised everyone by offering an insightful comment about market trends that made the older man's eyebrows rise with respect. You certainly know your business, Charles said approvingly. What field are you in? Harrison opened his mouth to answer, but Naomi spoke first. I work in tech, focusing on executive operations and strategic planning. It wasn't entirely a lie, Naomi reasoned. Managing Harrison's schedule did involve strategic planning, even if he had never recognized it as such. When the Whitmans moved on to greet other guests, Harrison turned to Naomi with an expression she couldn't quite read. Strategic planning? I do plan your strategies, Naomi pointed out mildly. Every day. I coordinate your meetings, arrange your priorities, manage your communications. That's all strategic planning. Harrison stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. I never thought of it that way. There are probably many things you've never thought of, Mr. Blake. Before Harrison could respond, the lights dimmed and a voice announced that dinner would be served. Harrison offered Naomi his arm, a gesture that seemed more genuine than performative, and they made their way to their assigned table near the front of the room. Their dinner companions were a fascinating mix of philanthropists, business leaders, and cultural figures. Naomi found herself seated between a museum curator and a tech entrepreneur, while Harrison sat directly across from her. As the evening progressed, she watched his expression grow increasingly complex. Every time someone complimented Naomi's intelligence or commented on her beauty, Harrison looked simultaneously proud and confused. When the tech entrepreneur spent 20 minutes discussing artificial intelligence applications with Naomi, barely acknowledging Harrison's presence, she could practically see her boss's worldview shifting in real time. You seem to know quite a bit about machine learning, the entrepreneur, Dr. Sarah Chin, said with genuine interest. Have you considered moving into the tech sector full-time? I'm already in tech, Naomi replied with a small smile. I work for Blake Technologies. Dr. Chen's eyes widened with recognition. Really? I've been following Harrison's work for years. What's your role there? Naomi glanced across the table at Harrison, who was listening intently. I handle executive operations. Make sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. That's incredibly important work, Dr. Chin said earnestly. The best executives are only as good as their support systems. Harrison's lucky to have someone so capable. Harrison's jaw tightened slightly, and Naomi realized he was beginning to understand just how much he had underestimated her. Not just her appearance, but her intelligence, her social skills, her value as a professional. After dinner, the dancing began. The string quartet was replaced by a small orchestra playing classic standards, and couples began moving onto the polished dance floor. Naomi watched with quiet longing, having always loved music but never having the opportunity to dance at such elegant events. "Would you care to dance?" She turned to find Harrison standing beside her chair, his hand extended. For a moment she considered refusing. This was the same man who had invited her here expecting to humiliate her. The same man who had treated her as invisible for 2 years. But the music was beautiful, and despite everything she had always found Harrison attractive. More than that, she could see something different in his eyes now. The arrogance was still there, but it was tempered by something that looked almost like regret. "I'd love to," she said, placing her hand in his. Harrison led her onto the dance floor with easy confidence, one hand settling at her waist while the other held her fingers gently. As they began to move together, Naomi was surprised by how well they fit. Harrison was an excellent dancer, leading with subtle pressure and perfect timing, and she found herself following his movements as naturally as if they had been dancing together for years. "You're full of surprises," Harrison said quietly, his voice close to her ear as they swayed to the music. "Am I?" Naomi tilted her head back to meet his gaze. "Or have you just never paid attention?" The question hung between them as they continued dancing. Around them, other couples moved in their own private worlds, but Naomi felt as if she and Harrison existed in a bubble of tension and possibility. "You're right," Harrison said finally, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I haven't been paying attention. I've been blind." "And what do you see now?" Naomi asked, her heart beating faster as his arms tightened slightly around her. Harrison's gray eyes searched her face as if memorizing every detail. "I see a woman who's been right in front of me for 2 years, and I've been too arrogant and stupid to notice how extraordinary she is." The sincerity in his voice made Naomi's breath catch. She had expected many things from this evening, but genuine remorse from Harrison Blake wasn't one of them. "One dance doesn't change 2 years of being treated like furniture," she said quietly, but without the bitterness she might have felt just hours earlier. "I know," Harrison replied. "But maybe it's a start." As the song ended, they remained standing close together, neither wanting to break the spell that had settled over them. Around them, applause rippled through the ballroom, but Naomi barely heard it. She was too focused on the way Harrison was looking at her, as if she had become the most fascinating thing in his world. "Would you like some air?" Harrison asked. "The terrace has a beautiful view of the city." Naomi nodded, allowing him to guide her through the French doors that led to an outdoor terrace overlooking Central Park. The night air was warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers from the hotel's rooftop garden. They stood at the stone railing, the lights of the city spreading out below them like fallen stars. For the first time all evening they were completely alone. "Naomi," Harrison said, and hearing her first name from his lips sent a shiver down her spine. "I owe you an apology." She turned to face him fully, surprised by the vulnerability in his expression. "I invited you here tonight for all the wrong reasons," he continued. "I thought you would be uncomfortable, out of place. I thought." He paused, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed very unlike his usual composed self. "I thought it would be amusing." "I know," Naomi said simply. Harrison's eyes widened. "You knew?" "Of course I knew." "You're not as subtle as you think you are, Mr. Blake." "Then why did you come?" Naomi was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "Because I needed to prove something. To you, but mostly to myself." "What did you need to prove?" "That I'm more than you ever gave me credit for," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "That I deserve better than being invisible." Harrison moved closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "You were never invisible, Naomi. I was just too blind to see you." But will Harrison's newfound appreciation be enough to overcome 2 years of indifference? Can Naomi really trust this sudden change of heart? Subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you think Naomi should do next. The orchestra's music drifted out from the ballroom, wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. As they stood there in the soft light filtering through the French doors, Naomi felt the first real stirring of possibility. Not just attraction, which had always been there despite her best efforts to ignore it, but something deeper. Something that might, with time and genuine effort, grow into something beautiful. But first, Harrison Blake would have to prove that this wasn't just another game to him. He would have to show her that the man she was seeing tonight, the one who looked at her with wonder and spoke to her with respect, was real. And that was going to take more than one magical evening, no matter how perfect it had been. The soft strains of a waltz drifted from the ballroom as Harrison and Naomi stood on the terrace, the city lights creating a romantic backdrop that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The evening had already been full of surprises, but the biggest shock for Harrison was the growing realization that he was genuinely attracted to the woman he had worked beside for 2 years without really seeing. "We should go back inside," Naomi said softly, but she made no move to leave the terrace. "Should we?" Harrison asked, stepping closer to her. "Or should we stay out here where I can actually hear myself think? What are you thinking about?" Harrison studied her face in the gentle light spilling from the ballroom. "I'm thinking about how wrong I've been about everything. About you." Before Naomi could respond, the music changed to something slower and more romantic. Without asking permission, Harrison extended his hand to her again. "Dance with me," he said. "Out here where it's just us." Naomi hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. This time, when Harrison drew her into his arms, there was no pretense of social obligation. This was purely because they both wanted to be close to each other. They moved together slowly, their steps unhurried as they swayed to the distant music. Harrison's hand at her waist felt warm through the silk of her dress, and when Naomi rested her free hand on his shoulder, she could feel the solid strength of him beneath the fine fabric of his tuxedo. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Harrison said quietly as they danced. Naomi considered the question. There was so much he didn't know about her that she hardly knew where to begin. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said finally. "Before everything changed." "What changed?" "My father had a heart attack when I was in college," Naomi explained, her voice growing soft with memory. "The medical bills were enormous and someone had to help support the family. I dropped out and got a job." Harrison's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "What were you going to teach?" "Elementary education. I love working with children, seeing that moment when something clicks and they understand a new concept." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I still volunteer at an after-school program when I can find the time." "You could go back," Harrison said. "Finish your degree. I could help with the expenses." Naomi pulled back slightly to look at him. "Why would you do that?" Harrison was quiet for a moment, seemingly surprised by his own offer. "Because you deserve to follow your dreams. Because I've benefited from your intelligence and dedication for 2 years, and you should have more opportunities than just managing my calendar." "That's very generous," Naomi said carefully. "But I don't need charity." "It wouldn't be charity. It would be..." Harrison paused, searching for the right words. "Would be recognition. An investment in someone who has more potential than I ever bothered to acknowledge." They continued dancing in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Naomi was trying to process this new version of Harrison, the one who seemed genuinely interested in her as a person rather than just as an employee. Meanwhile, Harrison was grappling with feelings he had never expected to have for anyone, let alone his secretary. "Your turn," Naomi said eventually. "Tell me something I don't know about you." Harrison considered her request carefully. He was used to keeping his personal life completely separate from his professional relationships, but something about this evening made him want to be honest with her. "I built Blake Technologies because I was angry," he said finally. "Angry?" "My father worked for a tech company for 30 years. He gave them everything, including most of his time with his family. When the company was sold, the new owners laid off all the older employees to cut costs. My father lost everything. His job, his pension, his sense of purpose. He died 6 months later." Naomi's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. I swore I would build a company that treated people better, that valued loyalty and experience." Harrison's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "Somewhere along the way I lost sight of that goal. I became exactly the kind of executive I once despised." "You're not that bad," Naomi said gently. Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Naomi, I invited you here tonight planning to humiliate you for my own amusement. I think that qualifies as pretty bad. But you didn't go through with it," she pointed out. "When you saw me tonight, you could have still treated me like a joke. Instead, you've been respectful and kind. Because you made it impossible to see you as anything other than remarkable," Harrison said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "You walked into that ballroom looking like a goddess, and then you proved you had the intelligence and grace to belong in any room you enter." Naomi felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "I'm still the same person I was yesterday morning." No, Harrison said firmly. You're not. Or maybe I'm the one who's different. Maybe you've always been this incredible, and I was just too blind and arrogant to see it. The music from inside grew softer, and their movements slowed until they were barely swaying, just holding each other in the gentle night air. Harrison's hand moved from Naomi's waist to frame her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek with infinite gentleness. Naomi, he whispered, and she could see in his eyes that he wanted to kiss her. For a moment she wanted it too. The romantic setting, the beautiful music, the way he was looking at her like she was precious and wonderful, all combined to make her heart race with anticipation. But then reality crashed back over her like cold water. This was Harrison Blake, her boss, the man who had treated her like she was invisible for 2 years. The man who had invited her here planning to embarrass her in front of New York's elite. No matter how sincere he seemed in this moment, no matter how her heart was responding to his touch, she couldn't forget the hurt and humiliation she had endured. We should go back inside, she said, stepping back from his embrace. Harrison's hand dropped to his side, but his eyes never left her face. Did I do something wrong? No, Naomi said quickly. It's just, this is all happening very fast. This morning you barely acknowledged I existed, and now I can't stop thinking about you, Harrison finished softly. I know how that sounds. I know I don't deserve your trust after how I've treated you. It's not about deserving, Naomi said, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold. It's about being realistic. Tomorrow morning we'll go back to the office and things will return to normal. You'll remember that I'm your secretary and I'll remember my place. What if I don't want things to go back to normal? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and uncertainty. Naomi wanted to believe him, but she had learned long ago that wanting something didn't make it true. Then you'll have to prove it, she said finally. With actions, not just words. Harrison nodded slowly. I will. I'll find a way to prove to you that what's happening between us is real. They returned to the ballroom together, but the magic of their moment on the terrace seemed to follow them inside. Harrison didn't leave her side for the rest of the evening, introducing her to important contacts and including her in conversations as if she were his equal rather than his employee. When the evening finally wound down, Harrison walked Naomi to his car with his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. The drive to her apartment was quiet, both of them lost in thought about what had transpired between them. Thank you for tonight, Naomi said as they pulled up in front of her building. It was unexpected. Thank you for giving me a chance to see who you really are, Harrison replied. And Naomi? I meant what I said about proving myself to you. As Naomi walked up to her apartment, she could feel Harrison's eyes following her until she disappeared through the front door. Once inside, she leaned against the door and closed her eyes, trying to process everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kendra. How did it go? Did you knock his socks off? Naomi smiled as she typed back, something like that. I'll call you tomorrow and tell you everything. As she prepared for bed, carefully hanging up the beautiful emerald dress and removing her makeup, Naomi caught sight of herself in the mirror. She still looked like the transformed version of herself, but she could see the familiar uncertainty in her eyes. Harrison Blake had surprised her tonight in ways she never could have imagined. But one evening didn't erase 2 years of being treated as invisible. If he really wanted to prove that his newfound interest in her was genuine, he would have to do much more than dance with her and whisper sweet words in the moonlight. She would wait to see what Monday morning brought. But for tonight, she allowed herself to remember the way he had looked at her, the gentleness in his touch, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something real could grow from this unexpected beginning. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Naomi's uncertain mood as she prepared for work. She had spent most of Sunday analyzing every moment of Saturday night, trying to determine how much of Harrison's behavior had been genuine and how much had been the result of shock at her transformation. She chose her outfit carefully, a well-fitted navy blazer over a cream silk blouse, paired with tailored pants that showed her figure without being inappropriate for the office. Her hair was styled in soft waves rather than the severe bun she usually wore, and she had applied subtle makeup. She looked professional but no longer invisible. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, Naomi stepped out and walked toward her desk, aware that several colleagues were looking at her with curiosity. Word had clearly gotten around that she had attended the charity gala with Harrison Blake. Good morning, Miss Washington. Naomi looked up to find Harrison standing by her desk, holding 2 cups of coffee from the expensive shop on the ground floor. He looked impeccable as always in a charcoal suit, but there was something different in his expression. Gone was the casual indifference she was used to seeing. Instead, he looked almost nervous. "Good morning, Mr. Blake," she replied carefully, accepting the coffee he offered. "Thank you. I was hoping we could talk," Harrison said. "In my office when you have a moment." "Of course. Let me just check your calendar and see what meetings you have this morning." "I've cleared my schedule until noon," Harrison said. "This conversation is more important than anything else on my agenda." Naomi felt her heart skip a beat, but she kept her expression neutral as she followed him into his office. Harrison closed the door behind them and gestured for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs by the window rather than in the formal chair across from his desk. "How was the rest of your weekend?" Harrison asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Quiet. I spent time with my family." Naomi took a sip of her coffee, surprised to find it was prepared exactly the way she liked it. "How did you know I take cream and 2 sugars?" Harrison looked slightly embarrassed. "I may have paid more attention to your coffee habits than I let on. So you did notice me at least occasionally." "I noticed you every day, Naomi. I just didn't want to acknowledge what that meant." The use of her first name in the office setting felt intimate and strange. Naomi set down her coffee cup and looked at him directly. What did it mean? Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city beyond. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "It meant that every morning when you walked into this office, my day got brighter. It meant that I looked forward to our brief interactions, even when they were purely professional. It meant that I noticed when you were tired or stressed, and I wanted to ask if you were okay, but I convinced myself it wasn't appropriate." Naomi felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "Then why did you treat me like I was invisible?" "Because I was terrified," Harrison said simply. "You work for me, Naomi. You depend on me for your livelihood. I told myself that any feelings I had for you were inappropriate, that acting on them would be an abuse of power. So instead you decided to humiliate me?" Harrison winced. "That was my moment of stupidity. I thought if I could prove to myself that you were just an ordinary employee, someone I could embarrass without consequence, then I could convince myself that my feelings weren't real. And now I know that you're extraordinary in every possible way, and my feelings are more real than anything I've ever experienced." Naomi's heart was racing, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Harrison, you can't just flip a switch and expect everything to change between us." "I know," he said earnestly. "That's why I wanted to talk to you this morning. I don't expect you to trust me immediately, and I don't expect you to return my feelings just because I've finally admitted them. But I want you to know that everything is different now." "Different how?" Harrison leaned forward in his chair, his gray eyes intense as they met hers. "Different in that I see you now. Really see you. Not just as my secretary, but as the remarkable woman you are. Different in that I want to know everything about you. Your dreams, your fears, what makes you laugh, what makes you cry. You've had 2 years to learn those things. I know, and I can never get that time back. But I can start now if you'll let me." Naomi studied his face, looking for any sign that this was another game or manipulation. All she saw was sincerity and something that looked like vulnerability. "What exactly are you asking for?" she said finally. "I'm asking for a chance to court you properly," Harrison said. "Not as your boss pursuing his secretary, but as a man who has deep feelings for an incredible woman. I'm asking for the opportunity to show you who I really am when I'm not hiding behind corporate arrogance and emotional walls." "And what about work? What about the fact that you're my boss?" Harrison had clearly thought about this. "I've already spoken to HR about restructuring your position. I want to offer you a promotion to executive assistant to the board of directors. It would be a significant salary increase, and you would report directly to the board rather than to me. That way, there would be no conflict of interest if we chose to explore a personal relationship." Naomi's eyebrows rose. "You're offering me a promotion?" "I'm offering you what you should have received long ago, based on your qualifications and performance. The promotion has nothing to do with my personal feelings for you, Naomi. It's simply recognizing your value as a professional. And if I take the promotion but don't want to pursue anything personal with you? Then you take the promotion and we maintain a respectful professional relationship," Harrison said without hesitation. "Your career advancement shouldn't depend on your romantic interest in me. That would be exactly the kind of behavior I'm trying to move away from." Naomi was quiet for several minutes, processing everything Harrison had told her. The promotion was tempting. It would mean more money for her mother's medical bills and Jerome's education, and it would give her the professional recognition she had been craving. But it also meant that if things went badly between her and Harrison, Her work life could become very complicated. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Harrison reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "In the meantime, I have something for you." "What is it?" "Open it and see." Naomi opened the envelope and found a check made out to her for $10,000. "Harrison, I can't accept this." "It's not a gift," he said quickly. "It's back pay. I calculated your salary for the past 2 years against the salary you should have been earning for the work you were actually doing. This doesn't even begin to cover what I owe you." Naomi stared at the check, overwhelmed. $10,000 would cover her mother's medical expenses for months and help with Jerome's tuition. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because it's right. Because you deserved better from me all along, and I'm finally trying to give it to you." Harrison's voice was gentle but firm. "Take the money, Naomi. You've earned it." Naomi folded the check carefully and put it in her purse. "Thank you." "There's one more thing," Harrison said. "I'd like to take you to lunch today. Somewhere nice where we can talk more about this. Not as boss and employee, but as two people getting to know each other." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Despite her reservations, despite 2 years of hurt and frustration, she could see something genuine in Harrison's eyes. Something that made her want to take a chance on him. "All right," she said. "But I choose the restaurant." Harrison smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, it reached his eyes. "Whatever you want." As Naomi returned to her desk to begin her workday, she felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Harrison Blake was offering her everything she had ever wanted: professional recognition, financial security, and the possibility of something real between them. The question was whether she was brave enough to trust him with her heart, knowing that if things went wrong, she could lose much more than just a job. But as she worked through her morning tasks, occasionally catching Harrison watching her through his office window with that new expression of wonder and respect, Naomi began to think that maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. The restaurant Naomi chose for lunch was a small, family-owned Italian place in Little Italy, far from the upscale establishments Harrison usually frequented. As they settled into a cozy corner booth, Harrison looked around with genuine interest. "I've never been here before," he said, studying the simple but warm decor. "How did you find this place?" "My family has been coming here for years," Naomi replied, accepting a menu from their elderly server, who greeted her by name. "The food is incredible and the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Romano, treat everyone like family." Harrison watched as the server, clearly delighted to see Naomi, brought them fresh bread and olive oil without being asked. "You're obviously a valued customer. I helped their grandson with his college applications last year," Naomi explained. "He's studying business now, hoping to expand the restaurant someday." "You helped him with college applications?" "I told you I volunteer with an after-school program. Tony was one of my students." Naomi broke off a piece of bread and dipped it in the olive oil. "He's a bright kid who needed someone to believe in him." Harrison found himself fascinated by this glimpse into Naomi's life outside the office. "What other volunteer work do you do?" "I help with literacy programs at the local library, and I volunteer at a soup kitchen on weekends when I can." Naomi shrugged as if this were nothing unusual. "There are a lot of people who need help, and I have skills that can make a difference." "You amaze me," Harrison said quietly. "Here I am, worth billions, and I write a check to charity once a year and consider myself generous. You give your time, your energy, your heart to helping others, even when you barely have enough for yourself." "Money isn't the only way to help people," Naomi said gently. "Sometimes what people need most is just someone who cares enough to listen." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Romano herself, who emerged from the kitchen to greet Naomi with a warm hug. "Naomi, cara mia, you look beautiful today," the older woman said, beaming. "And who is this handsome young man?" "Mrs. Romano, I'd like you to meet Harrison Blake." "Harrison, this is Mrs. Romano, who makes the best lasagna in New York." Mrs. Romano studied Harrison with the sharp eyes of someone who had been evaluating people for decades. Blake, you're the one who owns that big company, yes? The one Naomi works for?" "Yes, ma'am," Harrison said, standing to shake her hand respectfully. Mrs. Romano looked between them with obvious speculation. "Naomi is a special girl, Mr. Blake. She has a good heart. You be good to her, capice?" "I understand completely," Harrison said solemnly. "And I intend to be very good to her." After Mrs. Romano left to check on their order, Harrison turned back to Naomi with a smile. "I think I've been officially warned. Mrs. Romano is protective of the people she cares about," Naomi said, trying not to read too much into the warm way Harrison had responded to the older woman's concern. As she should be. You clearly mean a lot to her. She and her husband immigrated here 50 years ago with nothing but a dream and a few family recipes. They built this place from scratch, put 3 children through college and still find time to help their community. They're the kind of people who remind you what really matters in life. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Success without purpose is just accumulation. Exactly. Naomi was surprised by his insight. When did you realize that? Honestly? Saturday night, when I watched you interact with people who clearly respected and admired you. I realized that in all my years of building wealth and influence, I had never earned the kind of genuine affection you inspire in people. Their food arrived, and as they ate, Harrison continued to ask Naomi questions about her life, her family, her dreams. He listened with complete attention as she told him about Jerome's academic achievements and her mother's struggle with diabetes. He asked thoughtful follow-up questions and seemed genuinely interested in every detail. Tell me more about your sister, Harrison said. The one who designed your dress for Saturday night. Naomi's face lit up with pride. Kendra is incredibly talented. She went to fashion school on a scholarship and worked for several major designers before starting her own boutique. She specializes in evening wear and bridal gowns. She should meet with my stylist, Harrison said. I attend dozens of events each year, and I'm always looking for unique pieces for my dates. Naomi's expression cooled slightly. Your dates? Harrison immediately realized his mistake. I mean for you. If you're willing to attend events with me, I'd love to showcase your sister's work. That's assuming a lot, don't you think? You're right, Harrison said, setting down his fork. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm excited about the possibility of spending more time with you, and I want to find ways to support the people who are important to you. Naomi studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity. All she saw was earnestness and what looked like genuine affection. Why me, Harrison? She asked quietly. You could have any woman in New York. Why are you suddenly interested in your secretary? You're not just my secretary, Harrison said firmly. You're the woman who has been taking care of me for 2 years without me even realizing it. You're the one who remembers that I have a standing lunch meeting with my lawyer every 3rd Tuesday, who makes sure I eat when I'm too busy to think about food, who handles a dozen crises every day so smoothly that I never even know they happened. He paused, his voice growing softer. You're the woman who volunteers her free time to help others, who puts her family's needs before her own, who can discuss artificial intelligence with tech entrepreneurs and make elderly Italian women feel like family. You're brilliant and kind and beautiful, and I've been an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Naomi felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Harrison. I know I don't deserve a chance with you, he continued. I know I've been arrogant and blind and cruel. But if you're willing to let me try to earn your trust, I promise you won't regret it. Before Naomi could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her expression immediately changed to one of worry. What's wrong? Harrison asked. It's Jerome. He's been in an accident. Harrison was on his feet immediately. How bad? I don't know. The text just says he's at Mount Sinai Hospital. Naomi was already reaching for her purse, her hands shaking slightly. Come on, Harrison said, throwing money on the table without counting it. My driver is outside. We'll get you there in 10 minutes. Harrison, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he said firmly, guiding her toward the door. Your family is important to you, which makes them important to me. During the ride to the hospital, Harrison held Naomi's hand while she made frantic phone calls to get more information. When they arrived, he stayed with her in the emergency room waiting area, bringing her coffee and handling the paperwork while she focused on her family. Jerome's injuries turned out to be minor, a broken arm and some bruises from a bicycle accident. But watching Harrison step seamlessly into a support role, dealing with insurance forms and making sure Naomi's mother was comfortable in the hospital chair, showed Naomi a side of him she had never seen before. You didn't have to do all this, she said later as they waited for Jerome to be discharged. I wanted to, Harrison replied simply. This is what people do for the people they care about. As they sat together in the hospital waiting room, Naomi began to see that Harrison's pursuit of her wasn't just about winning a challenge or satisfying a sudden attraction. He was genuinely trying to become the kind of man who deserved her trust and affection. It was a revelation that both thrilled and terrified her, because it meant that what was growing between them might actually be real. 2 weeks had passed since Jerome's accident, and Harrison's behavior had been consistently thoughtful and attentive. He had sent flowers to Naomi's mother, arranged for Jerome to have the best orthopedic care, and even quietly paid the hospital bills despite Naomi's protests. Every morning brought coffee prepared exactly how she liked it, and every day he found small ways to show his consideration. But Naomi remained cautious, her heart still guarded despite Harrison's obvious efforts. She had accepted the promotion to executive assistant to the board of directors, but she had not yet agreed to pursue a personal relationship with him. The hurt from 2 years of being invisible was not easily erased, no matter how charming Harrison could be when he put his mind to it. "You're being stubborn," Kendra said as they sat in her boutique on a Saturday afternoon. "The man is clearly head over heels for you." "The man ignored me for 2 years and then invited me to a charity gala planning to humiliate me," Naomi replied, holding still while her sister pinned alterations on a new dress. "Forgive me if I'm not ready to trust his sudden change of heart." People can change, Naomi. Especially when they realize they've been idiots. Can they? Or is this just Harrison Blake playing a longer game? Kendra stepped back to examine her work. "What would it take to convince you he's sincere?" Naomi considered the question seriously. "Time. Consistency. Proof that this isn't just novelty or conquest for him." "How much time?" "I don't know. Maybe years." "Years?" Kendra raised an eyebrow. "Girl, you're going to make that poor man jump through hoops until he's too old to catch you. If he really cares about me, he'll wait." Meanwhile, Harrison was struggling with his own impatience. He had never had to work so hard for a woman's attention, and Naomi's continued resistance was both frustrating and oddly appealing. She challenged him in ways no one ever had, refusing to be impressed by his wealth or swayed by grand gestures. "She barely looks at me," Harrison complained to his best friend and company CFO Jonathan Pierce, over drinks at their usual club. "I've done everything I can think of. Flowers, gifts, helping with her family, giving her the promotion she deserved. Nothing works." "Maybe that's the point," Jonathan said mildly. "Maybe she doesn't want to be bought." "I'm not trying to buy her." "Aren't you? You're throwing money and gifts at her like you would at any other problem you want to solve." Harrison frowned into his whiskey. "What else am I supposed to do? Have you tried just being yourself? The real Harrison Blake, not the billionaire CEO version?" "I don't know who that is anymore," Harrison admitted. "I've been playing the role of successful businessman for so long that I'm not sure there's anything else left." "Then maybe that's what you need to figure out before you can win Naomi's heart." The next Monday, Harrison took Jonathan's advice to heart. Instead of grand gestures, he focused on small, personal interactions. He asked Naomi about her weekend, listened carefully to her answers, and shared details about his own life that had nothing to do with business. "I used to play piano," he told her one afternoon as they reviewed board meeting minutes. "Before my father died, before I became obsessed with building the company." "Do you still play?" Naomi asked, looking up from her computer. "I have a piano in my apartment, but I haven't touched it in years." Harrison looked almost embarrassed by the admission. "I told myself I was too busy, but really I think I was afraid I'd lost the ability to create something beautiful." "Music is like riding a bicycle," Naomi said gently. "It might take practice to get back to where you were, but you never really lose it completely. Maybe you could come listen sometime. If I ever work up the courage to play again." It was a simple invitation, nothing like the expensive restaurants and theater tickets Harrison had been offering. But something in his voice, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before, made Naomi's carefully constructed walls crack just a little. "Maybe," she said softly. Harrison began sharing more personal stories. His childhood fear of thunderstorms, his secret love of old black and white movies, his regret over never traveling anywhere that wasn't connected to business. In return, Naomi found herself opening up as well, telling him about her dreams of teaching, her family's Sunday dinners, her love of jazz music. These conversations happened during breaks, over lunch, in the quiet moments between meetings. They were building something neither had expected, a genuine friendship that could serve as the foundation for something deeper. But just as Naomi was beginning to soften, Harrison made a critical mistake. It happened on a Thursday afternoon when Naomi was dealing with a crisis involving the board meeting agenda. Harrison's assistant had double-booked a conference room, and Naomi was frantically trying to find an alternative venue for 20 board members on short notice. "Miss Washington," Harrison called from his office doorway, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "I need those quarterly reports copied and bound immediately." Naomi looked up from her phone, where she was on hold with the Fourth Hotel in 10 minutes. "Mr. Blake, I'm dealing with the venue crisis for tomorrow's board meeting. Could the reports wait 30 minutes? "No, they can't wait. I have a conference call in 15 minutes, and I need those reports for reference." The imperious tone, so reminiscent of the old Harrison, hit Naomi like a slap. For a moment, she was transported back to the days when her needs and priorities were always secondary to his convenience. "Of course," she said coolly, hanging up the phone. "I'll get right on that." Harrison didn't notice the change in her tone. He retreated to his office, focused on his upcoming call, while Naomi mechanically copied and bound his reports. But inside, she was reminding herself why she had been smart to keep her guard up. For the rest of the day, Naomi was politely professional but distant. She handled the board meeting venue crisis efficiently, arranged for catering, and ensured everything was perfect for the next day's meeting. But she did it all without the warmth that had been growing between her and Harrison over the past few weeks. Harrison noticed the change immediately but couldn't figure out what had caused it. When he tried to engage her in conversation, she responded with brief, professional answers. When he offered to take her to lunch, she politely declined, citing work responsibilities. By Friday afternoon, Harrison was desperate to understand what had gone wrong. "Naomi," he said, approaching her desk after the board meeting had concluded successfully. "Have I done something to upset you?" "Not at all, Mr. Blake," Naomi replied without looking up from her computer. "Is there anything else you need today?" "Yes. I need you to tell me what's wrong." Naomi finally met his eyes, and Harrison was struck by the cool professionalism he saw there. It was like looking at a stranger. "Nothing is wrong. I'm simply remembering my place." "Your place?" "As your employee. As someone whose job it is to handle your needs efficiently and without question, regardless of what else might be happening." Understanding dawned on Harrison's face. "The quarterly reports. Yesterday afternoon. You needed reports copied. I copied them. That's what I'm paid to do." "Naomi, I'm sorry. I was stressed about the conference call and I reverted to old habits. It won't happen again." "It doesn't matter," Naomi said, but Harrison could see that it did matter very much. "You were clear about your priorities and I responded appropriately." Harrison felt sick to his stomach. In one moment of thoughtlessness, he had undone weeks of careful progress. He had shown Naomi that beneath all his pretty words and grand gestures, he was still the same man who would always put his needs before hers. "It does matter," he said quietly. "It matters more than anything, and I'm an idiot for forgetting that." But Naomi had already turned back to her computer, effectively dismissing him. Harrison retreated to his office, knowing that he had a lot of work to do to regain the ground he had just lost. The question was whether Naomi would give him another chance to prove that his feelings for her were real, or whether this slip had convinced her once and for all that Harrison Blake was incapable of real change. 3 days after Harrison's thoughtless demand about the quarterly reports, Blake Technologies faced its biggest crisis in years. A major data breach had compromised client information, and the company was scrambling to contain the damage while dealing with angry customers, regulatory investigations, and plummeting stock prices. Harrison had been in back-to-back crisis meetings since 5 in the morning, and by afternoon, the conference room looked like a war zone. Empty coffee cups, scattered papers, and exhausted executives trying to salvage the company's reputation. "The clients are threatening to pull their contracts," reported the head of customer relations. "We're looking at potential losses in the hundreds of millions." "The press is having a field day," added the communications director. "Every tech blog and business journal is questioning our security protocols. And the board is calling for an emergency meeting," said Jonathan Pierce grimly. "They want answers and they want them today." Harrison sat at the head of the table, his usually perfect appearance disheveled after hours of stress. His tie was loose, his sleeves were rolled up, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man watching his life's work crumble around him. "What do we know about how the breach happened?" he asked for the 10th time that day. "We're still investigating," replied the head of IT security. "But initial reports suggest it was an inside job. Someone with high-level access deliberately opened a back door for the hackers." "Do we have any suspects?" "We're reviewing access logs and employee records, but it could take days to identify the source." Harrison rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the crisis crushing down on him. Blake Technologies had been his life for over a decade, and watching it potentially collapse was devastating. From her position near the back of the room, Naomi had been quietly taking notes and observing the proceedings. Despite the tension between her and Harrison, she couldn't help but feel sympathy for what he was going through. She had also been analyzing the information being presented, and something wasn't adding up. "Excuse me," Naomi said quietly, raising her hand slightly. The room fell silent. Most of the executives had never heard Naomi speak in a meeting before, despite her new role as executive assistant to the board. Miss Washington? Harrison looked surprised but not dismissive. Did you have a question? Actually, I might have some insight, Naomi said, standing up and moving closer to the table. I've been reviewing the access logs while listening to your discussion, and I noticed something odd. She pulled out her tablet and connected it to the room's display screen. The breach allegedly occurred last Tuesday night at 11:47 p.m. But look at this. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen showing employee access records. Every person with high-level access has an alibi for that time. Mr. Pierce was on a red-eye flight to London. Here's his boarding pass. Miss Chun was in the hospital with her daughter. Here are the medical records she provided for her insurance claim. Mr. Rodriguez was at his anniversary dinner. Dozens of social media posts confirm his location. The room was completely silent as Naomi continued her presentation. But here's what's really interesting, she said, highlighting another section of the spreadsheet. The access logs show that someone used David Sterling's credentials, but David was terminated 3 months ago. His access should have been revoked immediately. It was revoked, the IT security head said defensively. I personally oversaw his account deletion. Were you though? Naomi asked gently. Because I handle all termination paperwork, and while David's building access was revoked and his company equipment was collected, I never received confirmation that his system access was terminated. She pulled up another document. In fact, according to this IT ticket I submitted 3 months ago, David's system access is still listed as pending deletion, due to what was described as complications with legacy system integration. Harrison leaned forward, his exhaustion replaced by sharp focus. Are you saying David Sterling still had access to our systems? Not only did he still have access, Naomi continued, but according to these logs, someone has been using his credentials regularly for the past 3 months. Small accesses, nothing that would trigger security alerts, but consistent activity suggesting someone was mapping our systems and identifying vulnerabilities. She switched to another screen. I also cross-referenced this with David's exit interview. He was terminated for performance issues, but he claimed he was being made a scapegoat for problems in the client relations department. He was bitter and angry when he left. And he would have known exactly how to access our client database, Harrison said slowly, understanding dawning on his face. More importantly, Naomi continued, he would have known that his access hadn't been properly terminated because he kept receiving system update notifications at his personal email, notifications I copied on because he hadn't updated his forwarding address before leaving. She clicked to her final slide. I took the liberty of contacting building security. David was seen in the coffee shop across from our building last Tuesday evening at 10:30 p.m. The timing matches perfectly with the breach. The room erupted in excited conversation as the executives realized that Naomi had not only identified the likely source of the breach but had provided a clear path for resolution. This is incredible work, Jonathan said admiringly. How did you put this together so quickly? I've been handling termination procedures for 2 years, Naomi replied. I know what the process should look like, and I noticed the discrepancy in David's case months ago. When I heard about the breach, it was the first thing I thought of. Harrison stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Naomi's face. You solved it. In 4 hours, you solved what we've been struggling with all day. I just noticed what others missed, Naomi said modestly, but she couldn't hide the satisfaction in her voice. No, Harrison said firmly. You did what none of us could do. You saw the big picture, connected the dots, and provided a solution that could save the company. He turned to address the room. I want David Sterling's location traced immediately. Contact the FBI and local police. And someone please explain to me how a terminated employee maintained system access for 3 months without anyone noticing. As the executives scattered to implement Naomi's solution, Harrison approached her with an expression of profound gratitude and something deeper, respect and admiration that went far beyond what he had shown her before. Naomi, I don't know how to thank you, he said quietly. You may have just saved Blake Technologies. I was just doing my job, she replied, but there was a warmth in her voice that hadn't been there since their argument about the quarterly reports. No, you did much more than your job. You did what none of us, including me, were smart enough to do. You solved a crisis that could have destroyed everything I've built. For a moment, they stood looking at each other in the empty conference room, the weight of the crisis and Naomi's solution hanging between them. Why did you help? Harrison asked. After the way I treated you the other day, you could have sat back and watched me fail. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Because despite everything, I care about this company. I care about the people who work here, and I care about the clients whose information was compromised. And she paused, looking directly at him. I care about you. Even though I've been an arrogant fool? Even though, she said softly. Harrison felt his heart swell with an emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed him. Here was a woman who had every reason to resent him, who had watched him nearly destroy his own company through arrogance and poor judgment, and she had still stepped up to save him when it mattered most. Naomi, I know I don't deserve another chance with you, he said. I know I proved the other day that I'm still capable of reverting to my old behavior. But what you did today, the way you solved this crisis with intelligence and grace, it shows me how much I still have to learn from you. Harrison. Let me finish, he said gently. I spent my entire adult life thinking that success meant being the smartest person in the room, making all the decisions, controlling every outcome. But watching you work today, I realized that real leadership means recognizing brilliance in others and creating space for them to shine. He moved closer to her, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You make me want to be better than I am. Not just as a businessman but as a person. As a man worthy of someone as extraordinary as you. Naomi felt her carefully constructed walls finally beginning to crumble. Seeing Harrison acknowledge her professional capabilities, watching him recognize that he still had growing to do, made her believe that maybe his feelings for her were real. You hurt me, she said quietly. When you demanded those reports the other day, it reminded me of everything I hated about our old dynamic. I felt invisible again. I know, Harrison said, his voice thick with regret. And I will spend as long as it takes proving to you that I see you now. Not just as my employee, not just as a beautiful woman, but as my equal in every way that matters. Your equal? My equal, he repeated firmly. In intelligence, in capability, in value to this company. Today proved that you're not just qualified to be my partner in business. You're overqualified. You see things I miss, solve problems I can't handle, and bring perspective I desperately need. Will Naomi finally give Harrison the chance he's been working so hard to earn? After seeing her professional brilliance shine, can she trust that his admiration is genuine? Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments whether you think Harrison deserves forgiveness. Over the next several hours, as the crisis management team implemented Naomi's solution, her prediction proved correct. David Sterling was arrested at his apartment with evidence of the hacking on his personal computer. The FBI was able to trace exactly how he had maintained access and compromised the system, leading to a quick resolution that minimized damage to Blake Technologies. The press coverage, which had been brutal in the morning, shifted to praise for the company's swift response and innovative problem-solving. Stock prices began to recover, and clients expressed relief that the issue had been resolved so quickly and professionally. As evening approached and the crisis team finally dispersed, Harrison found Naomi at her desk, finishing up the documentation from the day's events. You should go home, he said. You've done more than enough for one day. Just finishing the incident report for the board, Naomi replied, not looking up from her computer. The board is going to want to thank you personally, Harrison said. What you did today, solving a crisis that stumped a room full of executives, that's going to be remembered for a long time. I'm just glad we figured it out before more damage was done. Harrison sat on the edge of her desk, a gesture that would have seemed presumptuous weeks earlier but now felt natural and comfortable. Naomi, I need you to know that what happened today changed something fundamental for me, he said. I've always known you were intelligent and capable, but seeing you in action, watching you outthink everyone in that room, it made me realize that I've been approaching everything wrong. What do you mean? I've been trying to win your affection by showing you how successful and wealthy I am, by offering you gifts and expensive experiences. But today I realized that what you really deserve is respect. Professional respect, intellectual respect, personal respect. Naomi finally looked up from her computer. Respect. Respect for your mind, for your insights, for your ability to see solutions that others miss. Respect for your judgment and your values. Respect for the woman who puts her family's needs before her own, who volunteers her time to help others, who solved a multi-million-dollar crisis because it was the right thing to do. Harrison paused, his gray eyes intense as they met hers. I want to be worthy of that respect in return. I want to be the kind of man who deserves a woman like you. Naomi felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the last knots of resistance she had been holding onto. Harrison. I love you, he said simply. Not because you're beautiful though you are. Not because you saved my company today, though I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. I love you because you're everything I'm not: kind, generous, thoughtful, and wise. You make me want to be better, and somehow you make me believe I can be. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time since the charity gala, she allowed herself to really look at Harrison. Not as her boss, not as the man who had hurt her, but as someone who was genuinely trying to change. I love you too, she whispered, and Harrison's face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. You do. I've been fighting it for weeks, but yes, I love you. Despite your arrogance, despite your mistakes, despite the fact that you nearly destroyed everything good between us with your thoughtlessness. She smiled through her tears. I love the man you're becoming, and I love the man you could be. Harrison stood up and moved around the desk to where she was sitting. Gently, he pulled her to her feet and cupped her face in his hands. I promise you, he said solemnly, I will spend every day proving that your love isn't misplaced. I will be the man you deserve, even if it takes me a lifetime to get there. And then, finally, he kissed her. It was soft and sweet and filled with promise, a kiss that sealed not just their romantic connection but their partnership in every sense of the word. When they broke apart, both were smiling. So what happens now? Naomi asked. Now, Harrison said, we go home. Tomorrow we come back to work as equals and partners. And eventually, when you're ready, maybe we can start planning a future together. I'd like that, Naomi said softly. As they left the office together, walking side by side toward whatever came next, both knew that what they were building was more than just a romance. It was a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of love that makes both people better than they were alone. 1 month after the data breach crisis, Blake Technologies was not only fully recovered but stronger than ever. The swift resolution had impressed clients and investors, leading to new contracts and a significant uptick in stock price. More importantly for Harrison, his relationship with Naomi had deepened into something beautiful and real. They had been taking things slowly, building their personal relationship on the foundation of respect and partnership they had established professionally. Harrison was a different man than he had been 6 months earlier. More thoughtful, more considerate, more aware of others' needs and feelings. The change wasn't lost on anyone who worked with him. You're practically glowing, Jonathan commented as he and Harrison reviewed quarterly projections in Harrison's office. Falling in love agrees with you. It's more than that, Harrison replied, glancing through his office window to where Naomi was conducting a video conference with board members. She makes me better. Every day in every way. Have you talked about making it official? Harrison's expression grew serious. I've been thinking about it constantly. But I want to do this right, Jonathan. I want everyone to understand that what Naomi and I have is real, that it's built on more than just attraction or convenience. What did you have in mind? Before Harrison could answer, his assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Blake? The board members are here for the quarterly meeting. Send them to the main conference room, Harrison said. We'll be right there. The quarterly board meeting was typically a routine affair, reviewing financial reports, discussing strategic initiatives, and addressing any shareholder concerns. The 12 board members, a mix of industry veterans and successful entrepreneurs, had been working with Harrison for years and trusted his judgment implicitly. Naomi had prepared meticulously for the meeting, ensuring that all reports were perfectly organized and that the presentation materials flowed logically. She had also prepared detailed background information on several agenda items, insights that she knew would be valuable to the board's discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison began as the meeting commenced, before we dive into the quarterly reports, I have some important announcements to make. He paused, his eyes meeting Naomi's across the room. She looked professional and composed as always, taking notes on her tablet, but Harrison could see the curiosity in her expression. As you all know, 1 month ago we faced a significant crisis with a data breach that threatened both our client relationships and our company's reputation, Harrison continued. The swift resolution of that crisis prevented millions of dollars in losses and actually strengthened our position in the market. Nods of agreement rippled around the table. The board members had been briefed on the situation and were well aware of how close the company had come to disaster. What you may not be fully aware of, Harrison said, is that the solution to that crisis came not from our executive team, not from our IT department, and not from the expensive consultants we hired. The solution came from our executive assistant to the board, Naomi Washington. All eyes turned to Naomi, who looked surprised at being singled out. Miss Washington identified the source of the breach through careful analysis of termination procedures and access logs. She connected dots that none of us had thought to connect, and she provided a clear path to resolution that saved the company, Harrison continued. Her insights, her attention to detail, and her analytical thinking prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss. That's excellent work, said Margaret Chin, the board's longest-serving member. We're fortunate to have such capable support staff. Naomi is much more than support staff, Harrison said firmly. Over the past months, I've had the opportunity to work more closely with her, and I've discovered that she possesses one of the sharpest business minds I've ever encountered. Harrison moved away from his position at the head of the table and walked closer to where Naomi was sitting. She sees patterns and connections that others miss. She anticipates problems before they occur and develops solutions that are both innovative and practical. She understands our business, our clients, and our market as well as anyone in this room. The board members were listening with increased attention now, sensing that this was leading somewhere significant. More than that, Harrison continued, his voice growing warmer, Naomi Washington is a person of exceptional character. She volunteers her time to help underprivileged children with their education. She supports her family through difficult circumstances. She treats everyone she encounters with kindness and respect, regardless of their position or status. He paused directly in front of Naomi's chair, and she looked up at him with wide eyes, beginning to understand what he was doing. She has shown me what real leadership looks like, not commanding from a position of authority, but inspiring through example. Not demanding respect, but earning it through consistent excellence and integrity. Harrison's voice dropped to a more intimate tone, though it still carried clearly through the conference room. Naomi Washington is the most remarkable woman I have ever met. She is brilliant, compassionate, strong, and beautiful inside and out. She has made me a better man and a better leader, and I am deeply, completely in love with her. Gasps of surprise rippled through the room. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes as she realized what Harrison was doing. I know that workplace relationships can be complicated, Harrison continued, addressing the board directly. I know there are concerns about power dynamics and professional boundaries. That's why I wanted to make this declaration public in front of all of you, so there would be no question about the nature of our relationship. He turned back to Naomi, his gray eyes shining with love and determination. What I feel for Naomi has nothing to do with her position in this company and everything to do with who she is as a person. She is my equal in every way that matters, and if she'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of her love. The conference room was completely silent as Harrison reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Naomi Washington, he said, dropping to one knee beside her chair, will you marry me? Naomi stared at the ring box, then at Harrison's face, then at the room full of board members who were watching with rapt attention. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Harrison, she whispered, are you proposing to me in the middle of a board meeting? I'm proposing to you in front of the people who matter most to our professional lives, Harrison replied. I want everyone to understand that what we have is real, that it's permanent, and that it's based on love and respect, not corporate politics or personal gain. He opened the ring box to reveal a stunning engagement ring, a classic solitaire diamond surrounded by smaller emeralds that perfectly matched the dress she had worn to their first public appearance together. I love you, Naomi. I love your mind, your heart, your strength, and your grace. I love the way you make me want to be better, and I love the way you see the best in everyone around you. Will you marry me? Naomi looked around the room at the expectant faces of the board members, then back at Harrison, still kneeling beside her chair. This was not how she had ever imagined being proposed to, but somehow it was perfect. It was public, it was honest, and it was utterly Harrison, dramatic, confident, and completely sincere. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then louder, yes, Harrison. I'll marry you. The conference room erupted in applause as Harrison slipped the ring onto Naomi's finger and then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that was witnessed by 12 very impressed board members. Well, said Jonathan Pierce with a grin, I guess we can move on to the quarterly financial reports now. As laughter filled the room and the board members offered their congratulations, Naomi looked at her new engagement ring and then at the man who had just declared his love for her in the most public way possible. You realize you just proposed to me in front of your entire board of directors, she said. I realize, Harrison replied, his arms still around her waist. I wanted everyone to know that this isn't a secret office affair or a temporary infatuation. This is forever, Naomi. You and me building a life together. Forever. Forever, he confirmed, sealing the promise with another kiss that made the board members applaud all over again. As they finally settled in to conduct the actual business meeting, Naomi couldn't help but smile at the beautiful ring on her finger and the man beside her who had just changed both of their lives in the most wonderful way possible. 6 months later, the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was transformed into a fairy tale wedding venue. White roses and emerald green accents filled the space, creating an elegant atmosphere that perfectly reflected Naomi's sophisticated taste. The guest list was a careful blend of family, friends, and business associates, all gathered to celebrate the union of Harrison Blake and Naomi Washington. In the bridal suite, Naomi stood before a full-length mirror, hardly able to believe the woman looking back at her. Her wedding dress, designed by Kendra, was a masterpiece, ivory silk that flowed like water with delicate beadwork that caught the light with every movement. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo with soft tendrils framing her face, and her makeup was perfect but natural. "You look like a princess," said her mother, Patricia Washington, wiping tears from her eyes. The past 6 months had been transformative for the entire Washington family. Patricia's medical treatments were fully covered by the health insurance plan Harrison had arranged, and she was healthier than she had been in years. "A very smart princess who landed herself a billionaire," added Jerome, looking handsome in his groomsman tuxedo. His broken arm had healed perfectly, and he was excelling in his senior year of college, with graduate school plans already in motion thanks to the scholarship fund Harrison had quietly established. "It's not about the money," Naomi said softly, adjusting her veil. "It's about finding someone who sees me for who I really am." "And who became a better man because of you," Kendra added, putting the finishing touches on Naomi's bouquet. The flowers were white roses mixed with emerald green succulents, tied with silk ribbon that matched her dress. A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jonathan Pierce peered in, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Ladies, I hate to interrupt, but Harrison sent me to check on you," he said. "He's pacing back and forth in the groom's suite like a caged tiger. I think he's afraid you might change your mind." Naomi laughed, the sound bright and joyous. "Tell him he has nothing to worry about. I'm not going anywhere." In the groom's suite down the hall, Harrison was indeed pacing, his hands running through his hair despite his best man's repeated warnings about messing up his perfectly styled appearance. "Relax," said his college roommate, Michael Chin, who had flown in from California for the wedding. "She said yes to your insane board meeting proposal. She's not going to run away at the altar." "I just want everything to be perfect for her," Harrison said, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. "She deserves the most perfect day imaginable." "It will be perfect because you're marrying the woman you love," Jonathan said practically. "Everything else is just details." The ceremony was held in the hotel's garden, under an arch covered in white roses and trailing greenery. 200 guests were seated in elegant chairs, creating an intimate but grand atmosphere. As the string quartet began the processional music, Harrison took his place at the altar, his gray eyes scanning the crowd until they found the back of the aisle. First came the bridesmaids, Kendra looking stunning in emerald green silk, followed by Naomi's college friend Lisa and Harrison's sister Rebecca, who had flown in from London. Then Jerome escorted his mother down the aisle, both of them beaming with pride. But when the music changed to the wedding march and Naomi appeared at the back of the aisle on her stepfather's arm, Harrison felt his heart stop. She was radiant, glowing with happiness and love, more beautiful than he had ever seen her. As she walked toward him, her eyes never leaving his face, Harrison felt tears of joy prick at the corners of his eyes. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" asked the officiant when they reached the altar. "Her mother and I do with joy and love," replied James Washington, Naomi's stepfather, placing her hand in Harrison's with obvious emotion. "You look incredible," Harrison whispered as James stepped back to join Patricia in the front row. "So do you," Naomi replied, squeezing his hand. The ceremony was beautiful and meaningful, with vows that Harrison and Naomi had written themselves. Harrison spoke about how Naomi had changed his life, teaching him the difference between success and significance, showing him that true strength came from lifting others up rather than standing above them. "Naomi, you saw potential in me that I didn't even know existed," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the garden. "You challenged me to be better, supported me when I stumbled, and loved me even when I didn't deserve it. I promise to spend every day of our marriage proving myself worthy of your faith in me." Naomi's vows were equally moving, speaking about Harrison's transformation and her own journey from invisible secretary to beloved partner. "Harrison, you taught me to see my own worth, to believe in my capabilities, and to never settle for being overlooked or undervalued," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You showed me what it means to be truly seen and appreciated for who I am. I promise to stand beside you as your equal partner in all things, supporting your dreams while pursuing my own. When they exchanged rings, the diamonds catching the afternoon sunlight, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Harrison's kiss was tender and full of promise, sealing their commitment in front of everyone they loved. The reception was a celebration of love, family, and new beginnings. Dinner was served in the hotel's ballroom, with toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Jonathan told embarrassing stories about Harrison's bachelor days, while Kendra shared memories of Naomi's childhood dreams of finding true love. To Harrison and Naomi, said Margaret Chin, raising her glass in the final toast of the evening. May your partnership be as successful in marriage as it has been in business, and may you continue to bring out the best in each other for many years to come. As the dancing began, Harrison led his new wife onto the floor for their first dance as a married couple. They swayed to the same song that had played during their first dance at the charity gala, but everything was different now. Gone was the uncertainty and tension that had marked that evening. In its place was the comfortable intimacy of two people who knew they were exactly where they belonged. So, Mrs. Blake, Harrison murmured against her ear, how does it feel to be married to your former boss? Like the beginning of the greatest adventure of my life, Naomi replied, smiling up at him. Though I should mention that I'm keeping my name professionally. Naomi Washington has worked too hard to build her reputation to give it up now. Harrison laughed, spinning her gently. I wouldn't expect anything less from my brilliant, independent wife. As the evening continued, guests shared stories and advice, danced and celebrated, and witnessed the obvious love and happiness of the new couple. Patricia Washington danced with her new son-in-law, thanking him for making her daughter so happy. Jerome impressed everyone with his improved dance skills, having taken lessons specifically for the wedding. But the most touching moment came near the end of the evening, when Harrison pulled Naomi aside for a private conversation on the same terrace where they had shared their first real moment together. I have something for you, he said, pulling a wrapped package from inside his jacket. Harrison, you've already given me everything I could want, Naomi protested, but she accepted the gift anyway. Inside was a framed diploma, a Bachelor of Education degree with Naomi's name on it. I don't understand, she said, looking confused. I contacted your old university. You were only 12 credits short of graduating when you left to help your family, Harrison explained. I've arranged for you to complete those credits through online courses, and I've already paid the tuition. You can start whenever you're ready. Naomi stared at the diploma, tears streaming down her face. You remembered that I wanted to be a teacher. I remember everything you've ever told me, especially your dreams, Harrison said softly. I know you love your work with the board, but I want you to have choices. I want you to be able to pursue every dream you've ever had. I love you so much, Naomi whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. I love you too, Harrison replied. My brilliant, beautiful wife who makes every day better just by being in it. As they stood together on the terrace, the sounds of celebration drifting from inside, both Harrison and Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a cruel attempt at humiliation had transformed into the deepest love either of them had ever experienced. Do you ever think about that night at the charity gala? Naomi asked. About how different things could have been? Every day, Harrison replied. If you had refused my invitation, if you had shown up looking exactly like I expected you to, if you hadn't been brave enough to transform yourself and challenge my assumptions about you, we would have missed out on all of this, Naomi finished. The best thing about that night wasn't seeing how beautiful you are, though you took my breath away, Harrison said. The best thing was realizing that I had been blind to someone extraordinary who was right in front of me all along. And now I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure I never take you for granted again, Harrison said, sealing the promise with a kiss that was witnessed only by the stars overhead. As midnight approached and the wedding celebration began to wind down, Harrison and Naomi prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Italy. But first, they took a moment to thank their guests and reflect on the incredible support they had received. Look around, Naomi said as they stood together in the ballroom watching their family and friends. 6 months ago, most of these people didn't even know we were interested in each other. And now they've watched us build something real and lasting, Harrison replied. Something based on respect, partnership, and genuine love. The best kind of love story, Naomi agreed. As they made their way toward the exit, rice and flower petals showering down on them from their guests, Harrison and Naomi Blake began their new life together. Behind them was a room full of people who had witnessed their transformation from boss and secretary to husband and wife. Ahead of them was a future filled with endless possibilities. The former secretary had become not just the wife of a billionaire, but his equal partner in every sense. And the arrogant executive had become not just a husband, but a man worthy of the extraordinary woman who had changed his life by showing him what real love could be. It was, indeed, the perfect beginning to their greatest adventure together.